So the first, one of the issues that came up time and time again, obviously with young people, is politics. Well, you may not say obviously, but it was politics. And some of the people that were asked the questions, in the survey, female respondents said they were less likely to hold a positive perception of politicians than their male counterparts. I didn't quite know why that was, that men would look more up to MPs than women would, apart from the fact that there's not enough of us in politics. But so let's find out this. Do you think politicians alienate young people? Let's ask Councillor Holdcroft, if we can, on this one.
Yeah, thank you, Sadie. I mean, clearly we have got a problem across all political parties in engaging with young people. I think that we're all really trying to focus and trying to get over the message that whatever young people care about in the community, it is politics and it matters. And if you want to have a voice and you want to have an effect, then you've got to really roll up your sleeves and start to become involved. I dare say that one of the problems are that certainly politicians can be their own worst enemies. I mean, I just use as an example, a lot of young people voted at the last general election because, particularly in the university towns, Liberal Democrat candidates were going around specifically making pledges on university fees. And that really communicated with young people. It was an issue that they understood, that they felt very strongly about. And many of them voted for those Liberal Democrats, who then became members of Parliament. And of course, having been elected, they then didn't carry through the pledge they'd made. And I think that sort of thing is massively damaging. And what we have to do is we have to identify those issues that are important to the young. And when we make pledges and promises to them, we have to ensure that we deliver.
Is that possible to do, though? I mean, especially with politics changes all the times, maybe there's money around for a certain thing at one time when you promise it, but then suddenly there isn't when you come to have to dish it out. I mean, Jack, how does this affect young people? Following on from what the councillor said then, in that, you know, they've got to be seen to be fulfilling their promises, but maybe sometimes that's impossible.
I think the perception of politicians in general is that they don't fulfil their promises. Most people, and I include young people in that, think that politicians say one thing and do another, and there aren't very many politicians I can call to mind that you can say have absolute integrity, especially with young people's issues. Young people are often demonised by politicians in their campaigns, so it's young people up to no good, young people doing this, young people crime. But there doesn't seem to be any support for young people, and any support there is for young people, like housing benefit for under 25-year-olds, seems to be stripped away by this current government. So I think that actually young people don't look up to politicians because they're so far removed from young people and young people's issues.
Can we cross actually to, Elaine, Jack's just saying there that, you know, young people, they now have to find the money or stay at home with mum and dad until they're 25. Is this going to push more young people to get into jobs, to get into the workplace, to make their mark and to be able to get out from mum and dad's feet?
Well, I think the thing I would want to bring up here, and also in response to the point about the concern one person made about unemployment, is just using the apprenticeship scheme, which certainly in my firm we've used that the last couple of years, and I think that it's a very good opportunity for young people to actually apply for jobs. People know that there won't be any experience, and they know they have to give it as part of the apprenticeship scheme, and I would hope that that could lead to helping to solve some of these problems.
Councillor James, how do we lift the view of MPs in our youngsters' eyes?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is how politics has changed from when those people are 50 or 60 now. Back in sort of the 70s, there really was the left and the right choice. And now, both Labour and the Conservatives and the Liberals, there's a lot more central ground. So I think campaigning on particular issues, such as the Liberal Democrats did with university tuition fees, is a way of getting people involved and interested. Obviously, there is an issue there that once you start making promises, and you call them promises, you have to keep promises. Otherwise, you really do damage, not just to yourselves, but to politicians as a whole. And I think we all know that politicians aren't the most favourite of profession as it is to start with, so we need to be very careful with those pledges. Just coming on to a point of things like housing benefit for under 25s, I think that is a way of engaging younger people to be interested. I'm all for restrictions on people under the age of 25 being given housing benefit. I stayed at home with my parents so I could save up, so I could then move out to rent somewhere. And I don't necessarily see why people who are able to do that should be allowed to be giving housing benefit to be able to move out straight away. There needs to be safeguards in place. For example, if an under 25 has a child, which is what this government has done, you can still get your housing benefit for that. Just like we have gone on to now talking and engaging people in saying that the housing benefit levels should be of a reasonable level for the areas that we live in. And I think that is an issue, along with an issue like that is a single issue that we can engage young people on and get them involved, and then we can start to discuss other issues, so that people, without realising it, are becoming involved in politics rather than knocking on the door saying, are you going to vote Conservative, are you going to vote Labour in the next election?
But sorry, James, your point about housing benefit for under 25-year-olds, it's great that you were able to live with your parents until you could save up to buy a property. But there are lots of young people who are either in care, who are removed from care at the age of 18 and sent out into the big wide world. There's people for who they have difficult family relationships, and living in that home is no longer an option for them once they're an adult. And not all people who move out of home at 18 move out running towards the benefit office saying, great, I can move out at 18 and get my housing benefit, I'm going to sponge off the state. People who can stay at home with their parents to save up and buy a house, from your position, as privileged as it sounds, generally do so. And the people who move out tend to move out for a reason, and not just because it's going to be a wild and wonderful life funded by the government.
Some fans here then, Jack.
If I could just come back on that,
Yeah,
I don't
of course you
actually
can,
necessarily think it's a privilege to stay at home with your parents until you're 25 to 30. There is actually, it's not right to say that if you're 18 you get thrown on the scrap heap. We're a first world country, we don't do that to people in this country. What we're saying is, when you're 22, you don't get given a one-bed flat that's paid for by the taxpayer. What you do get is you get a shared accommodation rate, which allows you to have a lesser amount, so you can go and live in a room, share a house rather than a room. We're not pushing it that far, unless you wish to. But you can go into shared accommodation, which is along the same sort of lines as those people that remain at home. It's not necessarily right that you should get a one-bedroom flat because you're 22, when other people that are staying at home don't have that. This is where the silent majority, I think, get very annoyed, quite incorrectly sometimes, with benefit claimants, because it's made out that they actually can have a better outcome than others. So by changing these anomalies that actually don't affect that many people, but it actually makes younger people in particular appreciate where we are in society.
Because Jack, isn't this the whole reason of this? Then we'll move on, and please put your hands up as soon as you've got a question. I just ask Jack this, and then actually no, let's you ask, lady there.
You're saying about saving while you're living with your parents. I graduated in July and had to move back home with my parents, and I haven't found a job yet. I've been in the job centre every single day, applied for probably over 100 jobs, and I'm still unemployed. How can I then save to buy a house, to even rent a house, when I can't even get a job?
Yeah, but
James has got the answers on the question.
not quite, but as he's been able to stay at home a bit longer than some of us, James. See, the problem is, as we know, is that it has to look fair, doesn't it? If I can bring that on maybe and move it on the way I was going to do it, in that is it fair though that someone else who doesn't bother trying to get a job can go and get a house? Is that fair? And then the person who is working actually looks, or is saving up to get to find a place, as James was, then feels it's not fair. That's the thing, isn't it? It's fairness. I mean, my mum and dad used to say, you know, you save and then you buy, and that's how they. I've not grown up like that because I've got a credit card with about as long as that. But do you know what I mean? It's like, well, if you want it, save up, and then you can have it. We can't all have everything. Any other questions? Yeah. We've got a mic coming round. Marvellous.
I got kicked out when I was 16 and I got an apprenticeship at Tony and Guy and I now live in Southend YMCA. You're saying you'd like to scrap the housing benefit system for people under 25 when some people have nowhere else to go, and yeah, I would not like to be on benefits, but doesn't mean I have a choice. I can't save up for things and then magically move out. You know, that's not how life works. Fair enough, people have got the opportunity to do that, but what happens to those that don't? We can't go running back to our parents. So I don't see how that would be fair on other people that can't do that.
Well, I don't think anybody's actually suggested scrapping the housing benefits the way they are. What it is actually saying is that somebody who is less than 25 will only be provided with enough money to be able to rent a room somewhere rather than rent their own place. That is, like the previous questioner said, she's had to go home after university. We're not in the economic climate now where you leave university, you can go and get a good job, and if you go, the lady's had to go home, she's struggling to find work, she's in the job centre every day. I mean, there aren't enough jobs about for full employment at the moment. We have to accept that. Therefore, if the ladies had to go home, why should somebody else who hasn't gone off to university, has decided that they want to live outside or they've been kicked out, why should they be provided with sufficient funds for a one-bedroom flat at such a young age? I'm not suggesting that they should have to go home to mum and dad or that they should have to, you know, live on the breadline. What I am suggesting is that it's not unreasonable for them to live in shared accommodation whilst the new apprentices that we've got in Southend who are on a low rate whilst they're training, whilst their taxes go towards providing for, you know, £500 or £600 a month for somebody to go and rent a flat who isn't working.
The original question was, how do we get young people more interested in politics? Does anyone from the audience have a suggestion? Anyone? No suggestion. We've got to have suggestions. You're the young ones who can tell everyone how. Yes, please.
Person and say what I did last year. I stood for election last year for the first time, and for every first-time voter in the ward that I was standing, I sent them a birthday card, and I wrote to them. I delivered them all personally, and I wrote to them and I explained what I was doing, why I was doing it, and what I stood for. I have got some data on the amount of people that voted, and it was very pleasing. So that was what I did, and I encourage every young person to vote in the Police and Crime Commissioner elections, which are coming up on the 15th of November. It is about taking that step to find where young people are. I also visited the YMCA as well. I did have a very interesting question and answer session with them, and they won. I didn't. I don't mind admitting that, but that's some of the things that I did.
Well done, well done. Mention the thing, there's a vote coming up soon. Now, I wonder how many young people here are going to be voting. How's it going to affect us here in Southend?
I'm not allowed to say too much on the Police Crime Commissioner.
I know, that's why I'm pushing.
It's because, obviously, my role is totally non-political, and there are certain candidates standing who political field in background independence, and I'm not allowed to get involved or make comments about those individuals. However, the election will take place, I think the lady said, on the November the 15th, which is not far away now, and people will be given the right to vote for a crime commissioner for Essex, the whole of Essex, and they will have that person will have responsibility for the budget of Essex Police, and also the ability to hire and fire a chief constable of Essex. And obviously, it's a totally new thing. This is the first election of its ilk. They'll be in charge of a large budget. They'll be standing or being in power for 5 years, and it'll be a very important position. And the idea is for that individual to be elected on a mandate and actually connect with the people, what they want around their policing, what type of policing they want, and what is a problem for them in their neighbourhood, and they have a directly elected person in power to be able to communicate that with the police.
All right. Can we ask, because most of you, I should imagine, will be able to vote in that, can we show of hands, are you going to vote? Who's going to vote? That's, well, it's not bad, is it? It's not bad. We could have had worse than that. Can we throw this over now, please, to Peter McAlister? He's Equality's representative, but also he was raised in Derry, and we were talking, and he's a very political bunny and has been since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. So how do we get young people interested in politics, Peter? Where are the politicians going wrong?
Going back to an original, somebody put it across, it's unfulfilled promises. In my opinion, unfulfilled promises, like the fees, university fees, they instill apathy in young people and say, well, you promised us to fight for free education, you didn't deliver, so I'm not going to vote. These kinds of things would discourage young people from voting because they feel they've been alienated by a political class that has their own interests at heart and not the populace, and particularly the young people at heart.
So keep it as realistic and real. Any further questions on this? Yes, lady.
I was just going to say, to do with like politics and stereotyping, kind of all in one, linking back to like the Nick Clegg video, like I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, he actually embraced that opportunity to make his video a spoof, and I think the problem is, well, in my opinion, David Cameron and Nick Clegg are kind of two worlds apart in one way, because Nick Clegg seems to care a lot about young people, whereas David Cameron doesn't really seem to care that much about young people, and Nick Clegg doesn't seem to have that much power, and he embraces the idea of a spoof video, and that's all like kind of he's quite a young person represented, but he has no power over David Cameron, and I'm wondering where we're going to end up in about, if nobody votes apart from them, we end up with a still government in 2 years. Is there actually going to be any sort of power from that other side over David Cameron? I just wonder what would change with the under 25s like housing benefit. Like question time last week, there was like Nick Clegg, representative of the Lib Dems, said that they wouldn't actually accept that. They wouldn't agree with them about under 25s being scrapped. But you know what happened with uni fees? Could it be the same way? I don't know. Just wondered from views.
It's an interesting point. I mean, I personally think that we have the power. We don't realise, but you know that's why certain MPs and that will be eccentric for certain. Am I right here? And you know they'll look at people who are going to vote for them, and if young people are going to actually vote, you will be wooed. I promise you, you will be wooed. But while it's like, oh, I don't care, it doesn't bother me, I don't know, you have no power. Do you know what I mean? If there's a group of you that all say we're going to get behind the party that gets behind us, I think you'll have more chance on that as well. I think it's like today. None of the 11 MPs that were contacted for this event agreed to take part, apart from David Amess. So we do appreciate you coming along. Why didn't they come? Can anyone tell us why didn't they come? Because you're not going to vote anyway, are you? Let's move on, shall we? Because it annoys me. Okay, you have the power, young people.
Sadie, just before we move on, voice from the audience, at Rob Brown, 1991, is he here? He seems to be tweeting from the audience somewhere. Hello. You were being quite vocal on Twitter, using the hashtag SouthendQT. I mean, could you just relay some of what you were saying to the panel?
I just think it's quite interesting that we're talking about engaging young people in politics, and the first thing Councillor Courtenay could think of is let's cut everything from them, make them homeless, and then they'll vote. I don't think that's the nicest point of view to be coming from, personally. And I also wonder whether David Amess would consider answering the questions on housing benefit as well, seeing as he's here.
I can but ask, do you want to?
I think James is doing a brilliant job.
Oh, they're marvellous, you're marvellous, very good at that.